Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by 1, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by 1.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I'm joined by Eric Pond and Pete Worth, and today we've got a special treat for you. We have Matt Velazquez of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel joining the show for the first time. Matt, thanks for joining the Real Chili Podcast.
Absolutely. I know we've been trying to do this for a little bit, so I'm glad that I could do it.
We're thrilled to have you on, and I know in the Marquette basketball community, you are a well-respected guy for your work ethic, so we're thrilled to have you on and be able to share some of your thoughts with the listeners today. And first off, I got to ask, how familiar with Marquette basketball were you before you got this post at the Journal Sentinel?
Not incredibly well-versed in Marquette. I grew up in Connecticut. I was a UConn fan. My mom went there. When you're in Connecticut, you got nothing else going except for UConn basketball, men's and women's. So you pay attention to it. You keep track of it. With Marquette joining the Big East, they came onto my radar. I got to watch, at least 1 or 2 Marquette games a year, depending on when they played UConn. My only positive Marquette memory came, I think, during the NCAA Tournament in the Vander Blue year, where they beat Davidson, mostly because I had Marquette in my bracket going kind of far. So, Marquette wasn't totally right up there on my radar, but I'd already been at the Journal Sentinel for a little bit over a year by the time I got on the beat, so I was a little bit more familiar with Marquette just from that 1 year. That's kind of my background with Marquette, but not very much until the last couple of years.
And so, folks, you can probably hear that Matt is broadcasting live from the BMO Harris Bradley Center right now. And Matt, I'm curious as to, in your typical workday during Big East season, what are you going through? What are you doing on a game day from before the game, during the game, to post-game?
Well, usually on a game day, I've already written a preview story that'll have, dropped the night before or the day before or whatever. So I've probably done more of my research on both teams before that point. Kind of just watching as much as I can and reading as much as I can, especially about the opposing team and knowing, kind of what Marquette's getting into. I look at, obviously, Kenpomcom a lot and try to understand, the advanced stats aspect of things and kind of what each team is good at, what they're not good at. And then, on a game, usually game days are pretty straightforward. They're pretty chill, especially if it's a night game. Like, you get up, you have a normal day, you kind of, live your life. And then I usually like to get to the Bradley Center, if it's a home game, about 2 hours before the game starts. That way I'm there before people are in their seats, before anything else is going on. I can see which players are coming out to the court, which today worked out great. I saw Marcus Howard was in a polo and khakis, and I said, he ain't playing. So I had to go figure out, what the reason was, and got to put that out there. I didn't realize, maybe that's my own fault. I didn't realize Kane Reinhart wasn't out there either. And I didn't notice him, but I wasn't able to get any information about him before Marquette put out there that he has a lower leg injury, and so he's out for tonight too. So we'll have to see post-game, because right now, for me, I have no access to the players or to Wojo until after the game. So I'll have to find out after the game what the full story is on that. Obviously you got to get there early enough to see that. Also get a little bit of food and, kind of chat with the other people who are here in the media room and all that stuff. For away games, usually I'll do something similar, except if I'm in a good city. I'll try and walk around and see what I can see, maybe visit some friends if I know some people. The Big East has a lot of good cities that I can, get around to and visit friends and family and, have some good eats. So, that's usually the daytime on the road, but I still get there to the gym about 2 hours ahead of time. And if it's a new arena, especially in the non-conference or whatever, I'll get there a little bit more than 2 hours ahead of time just to make sure I don't get lost.
Matt, this is Pete Worth here. I think I speak for all Marquette fans when I say thank you for your meticulous basketball coverage. I can't see Michael Hunt, your predecessor, looking up Kenpom.com to actually help his beat. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nowadays it's hard not to look at Kenpom. I'm not paid by Kenpom, but I'll plug Kenpom. Tell you that for $20 a year, especially being in this line of business, I mean, you can't pass it up. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge, and it helps you understand the game in a way that, you know, someone who's not paying that $20 isn't going to be able to understand it. So I think that, you know, maybe if I can look there and give people some stats and save them some money so that they don't have to go look them up themselves. I mean, that's kind of what I'm here to do, and trying, you know, I have the access to the players and the coaches, and I have the ability to talk to them and kind of bounce things off of them and learn from them, but being able to look at raw numbers, you know, and then use that to inform the way that I approach my job. I think that helps everyone.
Talking about Kenpom numbers, Marquette in the early going, very good offensively, very high marks, not so much defensively. I don't know if that was a surprise, if we predicted that going into the year, but what either offensively, defensively about any of the team, I guess, has been your biggest surprise so far in the early going?
I'm a little surprised at how good their free throw shooting is. I mean, I guess that shouldn't be that big of a surprise considering that they have such good shooters all around. I don't know that I expected the defense to be as much of a work in progress as it is right now. I knew the offense would be good. I mean, you watch the guys. I was able to get into a couple practices this summer, and you watch the guys and you see the numbers that they have written on their whiteboard for all their different drills, and you just say, you know what, these numbers are going to translate. These guys are going to get buckets. It's going to happen. And the question was always going to be, how good would their defense be in comparison to their offense? And it wasn't going to be at the same level of their offense. If it was, I mean, that'd be like a Final Four caliber team. If you're talking about top 20 offense and top 20 defense, that's a very, very high level team. So the defense wasn't going to be up there, but, you know, I didn't expect it to be so porous that they're letting basically anyone and everyone score 70 points or more. And I know that part of that comes with playing at a faster pace, but part of that comes with not being able to stop anybody. I mean, and in games where they have allowed fewer points, a lot of the times it's playing against teams that just don't shoot well. And sometimes people confuse, you know, good defense with teams just not shooting well. And, you know, when you play better teams, you know, Marquette has not played, you know, they have better shooters, and Marquette has obviously struggled most against the better teams. And that's something that, if it continues, will be a very problematic in the Big East.
Matt, do you think there's any way that it doesn't continue? I mean, does this team have the capability of improving, or are we just kind of resigned to our fate that we're going to struggle against these Big East teams due to our lack of physical presence?
I think it's something that can change. I mean, I know just from the practices I was at, they work on defense all the time, and it's something that guys are still learning. You forget that a lot of the guys on this team are young, you know, but obviously you have guys like Jawan Johnson, who he's a senior, he should know better, and he's still a streaky defensive player. You know, when he's at his best, he's very, very disruptive in the passing lanes, and he gets steals, but sometimes he's just kind of a step slow or a step behind in his rotations, and he needs to tighten that up. You know, and you know, I think that those things, if everybody's locked in and playing the highest level of defense that they can, I think that they can, you know, they can put together stretches even against the better teams where they're being effective. And that takes a five-man unit of people playing the same way and the same intensity, and knowing that if they do something, the other guys around them will move in a way that kind of, you know, protects the basket and makes up for whatever they do. And I think that it just comes with more time together, more experience, and more focus. I'm also interested to see if they end up playing any zone or throw out like a 1-3-1 or 2-3 and just kind of see how it goes against other teams, especially since some of their guards don't have the foot quickness to keep up with other teams' guards. It's just a fact. And so if they can, you know, use the zone at times to make up for that, then that will be a positive. But the 2 or 3 times I remember them breaking out a zone this year, teams immediately just destroyed it and got open looks, and Wojo went right out of it. So I think that might be something they need to do more work on. But we'll see if they go back to it. Wojo wants to play man, and this could be a year where they learn, kind of, you know, get thrown into the fire playing man.
Matt, this is Eric Pond here. I just wanted to chime in as well and say thanks for joining us. Joe Lunardi just posted a column assessing several notable non-conference resumes across the country to date. Included in that list was Marquette, and he said what we all basically know, and that's that this team has been, quote, missing in action against teams in the top 68 thus far. We have obvious chances to improve that against, the top 68 during our Big East campaign. Based on what you've seen thus far, do you see this Marquette team making the NCAA tournament? And if it doesn't, what does that mean for Wojo and his staff?
As of right now, the way that Marquette has been playing, I don't see them being an NCAA tournament team. I think they're relatively close, and I think that they could and maybe should be an NIT team this year. I think I've said from the beginning in different forums that this year every year under Wojo they've improved. And I think this year you look less at the win-loss column in terms of improvement, and you look and see, can they make the postseason? If they're a 19-win team, but they get some good ones and they make the NIT, I think that's a success. I mean, obviously, if they could then get more than 19 wins in the postseason. But, last year, getting Henry Ellenson really changed things a lot, because the expectations for the first year were low. I mean, he had 8 guys, for most of the year. They were not all the greatest players. I think, a lot of the fans would say that, when Buzz Williams left, he left the cupboard bare. And, I think that the record bore that out. And, so you wouldn't expect necessarily for that team in the next year with one recruiting class to immediately just get stocked full of talent and roll the NCAA tournament. But that suddenly became a possibility when Henry Ellenson decided to come. And, when you can get a guy like Henry, you get a guy like Henry. End of story. I mean, no coach is going to say, hey, there's a 5-star guy, let me not get him. That's ridiculous. Right. And so you bring him in, and obviously with that, I think to some extent you adjust the way you play and adjust the style a little bit to fit that player, because he's obviously head and shoulders talent-wise above the rest of your team. And you kind of just roll with it and see where it takes you. And that took Marquette to a 20-win season when, admittedly, they didn't have a very tough schedule, but they got 20 wins, and that's a milestone marker. The negative thing about that was that it sets up expectations where people say, oh, well, you won 20 games last year. If you win any less, you're going backwards. And I think that's kind of unfair, considering that, Henry was a one-and-done guy. So now you're looking at a team where, you're relying on the rest of that supporting cast and a couple of new freshmen and guys who were, Hanif Cheatham and, the recently departed Tracy Carter, who were, freshmen playing huge minutes last year. Like, that was one of the youngest teams in the country, and they got 20 wins. Like, that's not too shabby. So this year, I think the goal is to get to the postseason. I don't know if it'll be the NCAA tournament. It'll be really tough considering the state of the Big East. But I think the NIT would be a respectable step. And even if they don't get there, I don't think that's going to be anything that warms Wojo's seat or anything like that. I think it would take an absolutely catastrophic second half of the season for there to be any issues with Wojo being at the school. I think the university and the athletic department showed, especially last year, putting their money where their mouth was, extending him, and saying, hey, we like this guy, we like the progress, we like what he is for our school, we like the character of the guys he's bringing in, we like the trajectory of where things are going, and as long as they play, the way that they're expected to play, and kind of, they'll have some ups and downs. Maybe they'll be like last year, where, maybe they beat a top 10 team like they did against Providence last year. And, as long as they don't lose to DePaul again at home, I don't think you can do that 2 years in a row and feel really good about yourself. But, they're going to have ups and downs, and they'll put themselves in the conversation, and for at least a postseason bid at some level. And we'll see where it ends up. But, I don't think Wojo's on the hot seat at all.
So zooming in just a little bit to some of the little more granular level, there's been some really positive things that have happened this year. They went on the road and got a huge win against Georgia. They opened the season with a win against Vanderbilt. But peppered in, there's a tough loss to a very, very good Wisconsin team, a couple of tough losses in the 2K Classic, and then a couple of transfers. So before we get into those specific things, what do you think the mood of this team is right now with some of the things that have gone on in the past few weeks? Where do you think this team's head's at right now?
I think their heads are right. I think they're fine. I think they understand that they've had the tough losses. Obviously they're not coming off finals like last year where they beat Wisconsin on the road, then went into finals and were feeling really good about themselves. I think they've kind of have a workman-like attitude among them. Just knowing that they got to keep grinding. There are a lot of things to get better at. They've kind of got to hunker together. They lost two teammates recently to transfers, and they just need to kind of tighten up and kind of feed off each other. I think that's the general attitude. At least that's the one that I know that that Wojo would be pushing. Just having covered him for a couple years.
Speaking specifically about Tracy Carter, want to know if you were surprised by his sudden departure, and then also following up on that, in your opinion, although it wasn't mentioned in your write-up about it, how big of a factor do you think his lack of playing time, and especially his potential lack of future playing time, weighed in or impacted his decision?
Yeah, initially I was surprised, mostly because I was just sitting in my house, hanging out and checking Twitter, and I just happened to see it at that point, and I was like, "Oh man, like where'd that come from?" Like I wasn't ready for that. My wife, who isn't a big basketball fan or big sports fan, she'd ask me, she says, "Oh well, you don't expect to have anything going on this week, right?" And I was like, "No, I mean, according to my own reasoning, it didn't make sense for anybody to transfer." But the more I thought about it, and when I talked to Tracy, he made it clear that being closer to family was what he wanted, and it's something he'd been thinking about, and it was something that there have been problems back home, and he just wanted to be back in Philly, and that's why Luke Fisher's here. Luke Fisher said was at Indiana. He decided he didn't want to be as far away from his family anymore, and he came home, and that's kind of what it was, and you can't blame a guy for that, and Tracy didn't get into it, but I could see, playing time being something that played a role. I could understand that. It's not that Tracy said it or alluded to it in any way, but through the first, as I wrote in my story, through the first 8 games of the season, there was basically equal minute share between Rousey, Carter, and Howard, and they were all within like 16 minutes of each other. It was really tight. In some games it was one guy, some games it was another, and sometimes that was dictated by fouls or whatever, but it was pretty equal. And, then the Georgia game happened. He didn't play very much. And then the next 2 games, he was hurt. And so, obviously, the other 2 guys had more playing time once he got hurt because he missed 2 games and they picked up the slack. But I think it was, something that maybe he could have thought, not that he did or he said he did, but maybe he could have thought, okay, Marcus is going to be the starter. And, he's earned that. And, that's, I'm going to be coming off the bench and I can go start somewhere else or play somewhere else. And, I can understand that line of reasoning, and that's not wrong. I think it's one of those things that it's kind of part of the building a program process, because what Wojo, if that was the case, I'm not saying it was, but if it was, Tracy came in and they needed a point guard. They had nobody. And so, Tracy came in and put up good numbers, played hard, got big minutes. And it's really hard to go from putting in big minutes as a freshman to getting fewer minutes the next year. Yeah. And, and that happened because, obviously Andrew Rousey was going to get some playing time after, sitting out a season. But Marcus Howard came in, and Marcus Howard is a very good player. Yeah. And I think if Tracy left because at any part because he said, you know what, Marcus is better than me, he's going to take my minutes, and I need to move on. You can't blame him for that, but I think it's kind of hard to put too much blame on Wojo for that, because you're saying, hey, you recruited a really good guy, you should have kept the other guy too. It's like, well, you can't control him. He can go if he wants to, and you can try and sell him all you want on, you're going to be a key member of our team, you're going to play big minutes off the bench, you're going to be a contributor. We need you to run the offense and move the ball around, do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, if a guy says, hey, I want to start, and I want to play 30 minutes a game, and that's something you can't offer him, then he goes. And so, it's not a bad thing to keep bringing in really good players, but at some point you reach an equilibrium where, you bring in a Hanif Cheatham, and, based on the guys they have, I don't see a reason why he doesn't start all 4 years. And you bring in a Marcus Howard, and you let him, and he's going to keep starting. And you bring in a Sam Hauser, he's going to keep starting. And then eventually, the freshmen who come in aren't displacing the guys who are on your team, because as good as they are, they're not better than the guys you have. And so, 3 years in, they haven't necessarily reached that equilibrium point, but you can't necessarily fault Wojo for recruiting better players. It's hard to retain them, and sometimes you can sell a guy on taking a different role, but sometimes, especially in college basketball the way it is now, sometimes that's not going to be the case.
Talking about roster construction and looking ahead a bit, can you tell us a little bit about next year's incoming freshman class of Jamal Cain, Theo John, and Ike Eki, who are all 6'7" to 6'9" forwards? From your Twitter feed, it looks like Wojo was just in Detroit watching Cain play. I also saw you retweet a ridiculous Theo John sequence from a tournament he was playing in. So quickly, how excited should Marquette fans be for the dynamic that these three are bringing in? And also, any idea what's going on with Joey Hauser in 2018? We all hope he's the silver tuna coming to us here.
Yeah, well, I think with those three guys, I think the most important aspect when it comes to them is that they'll bring some roster balance. They'll bring, some height, some athleticism, some length, and, Wojo's looking at constructing a more balanced team. And that's really what he said most often when talking about this recruiting class when they all signed. He said he wanted to get balance. He wanted to get guys, who had some athleticism and could add that. Obviously, with Luke Fisher graduating, there's going to be a void down low, and Wojo said that Theo John, and obviously if you've watched any of his highlights online, you could probably see for yourself that he has a college-ready body, more so than the other two guys. That he's big, he's strong, and he looks like he's ready to contribute. He's a pretty fluid player, can score. He loves to play defense, and he's a high character kid. So I think he's a strong player. Jamal Cain is able just to do everything. He's so long and athletic, and really I think he'll complement the guys that they have well. And you saw last year with Marcus and Sam that those guys were shooters. They were a certain type of player, and they could score. They could fill up the stat sheet. These other guys, they're more. I think they're more all around players. They play good defense. They're long. They've got some size, and they can do different things. And then with Joey Hauser, I mean, Joey's been to a bunch of games watching his brother. He's here a bunch, and that Marquette's all over him. I mean, they really are pushing hard, just like every other big school that's in on him. You get the Michigan States of the world. He's a high quality, high level recruit, and when he's the guy who's a brother of somebody on your team and he's in your home state, it's kind of like Henry Ellenson. No matter what he's gonna be, and no matter what he's gonna decide to do, you try your hardest to get him, because guys who are at his talent level don't come around often and aren't going to be in your state all the time. So you really push and you try and get those guys. And so, I have no reason to believe that they're not pushing hard to get them, though. Joey has said in many times, many interviews, many places, he's very open in his recruiting process, and he's not just going to come here because Sam's here, and Sam doesn't expect that. But we'll see how it bears out.
We're all hoping that it bears out in Marquette's favor, and with the new crop of the guys coming in next year, those kind of athletic jumping jack kind of guys we've been desperate need of for the last few years. The guys that seems like Xavier has a new one every year. So hopefully one of those guys turns into that for Marquette. Matt, I think we're. Well,
and the interesting thing too is that with these two guys transferring, that opens up two more scholarship spots.
Yeah.
And so, whatever Wojo and his staff had been planning to do before these transfers, because I don't think they were necessarily 100% expecting these guys to leave. They didn't want Sandy or Tracy to leave. They weren't pushing them out by any means. But
right.
You can't keep guys if they want to go. You can't keep them if they want to go. But if they decide to go, you say, all right, now what can we do? Now they can look into the transfer market, graduate transfers or otherwise, and they can also look at other freshmen and decide what to do. And Wojo told me many times he's never surprised by anything in college basketball nowadays. That things are how they are, and guys move and things happen. But he and his staff always try to prepare no matter what. They don't stop recruiting just because the scholarships are full. They keep looking. They keep making inroads and trying to see who they can get. And so with 2 more spots, they can add more guys. I mean, there's still plenty of time left before the spring signing period. They could add another freshman or 2. Then they could also look at transfers and graduate students. So there'll definitely be opportunities down the road for Marquette to even add more for even as soon as next year's team.
Very right. It'll be interesting to see where Marquette and specifically Wojo, where they go from here in terms of getting new players. Matt, I got kind of a personal question for you. Your former coworker and me and Mike's former roommate, Matt Montgomery, we would like to know, I don't know if you knew that we were former roommates with Matt, but we want to know, we want to know, were his eating habits and his diet as bad at the Journal Sentinel office as they were in 2009 in Milwaukee?
Well, I don't know about 2009 Milwaukee, but he was a big fan of the buffet items at Whole Foods.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
All right. So he's improved.
He upgraded.
Yeah, he did. He usually stuck to just like the Roundy's chips when we were living with him. Maybe that was due to income purposes, but I don't know.
He's a lot better now. He definitely eats better than I do.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good.
Though we both share a love for DiGiorno pizza.
All right. Well,
Can't blame you there.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
It's not delivery.
We're getting close to time here, so I think that's going to do it for us. Appreciate you joining the show. We appreciate you sharing your insights with us. We hope we can have you back on the show many times in the future. Best of luck tonight, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Let's definitely try and work something out for the future.
Great.
Thanks for your time, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
We'll talk to you later, guys.
Well, there you have it, folks. Terrific insight from Matt Velazquez. We hope you enjoyed the interview. We'll be back soon to preview the Big East Conference season. A lot of tough challenges coming up, but a lot of big opportunities for this squad to improve and hopefully find its way into the postseason tournament. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon here on the Real Chili Podcast.